A black man quietly walks into a luxury store, only to be met with a brutal dismissal from the racist owner who despises black people and pushes him out without a second thought. But the arrogant owner doesn't know that his insensitive action will cause a whirlwind of consequences that he can't escape from just one day later. John Lewis stood on the sidelines of Fifth Avenue, blending into the busy flow of New York people. The cool autumn wind blew through his simple black jacket, causing the hem to sway slightly. John pulled his cap down low, obscuring his face and eyes, quietly observing the bustling flow of people going in and out of the luxury store in front. This store was his own, a high-rise building with a glossy glass facade and a prominent gilded golden lux lettering above the entrance. John took a deep breath, stepped forward and gently pushed the heavy glass door. The doorbell rang softly, announcing his presence. The space inside is a splendid world with shiny marble floors, luxurious velvet seats, and delicately displayed high-end jewelry. The scent of expensive perfume wafts in the air, combined with gentle jazz music, creating a luxurious and cozy space. John, today, is just an ordinary guest, carrying no power or title. He was wearing dark jeans and a black jacket, looking no different from any other normal customer. This is how he wanted to experience how his store was operating without being influenced by title or status. But today is not like the previous times. Today, he returns to the place he is most proud of to see the truth going on inside this store. John walks slowly along the display cases, eyes intently looking at the high-end watches displayed inside. He loves the craftsmanship and meticulousness in every detail of these watches, items that he himself helped select for the store's collection. But today, he is not the owner's choice, but just an ordinary guest. While John was examining a slim silver watch with a leather strap, he saw Richard Coleman, the franchise owner, standing near the counter. Richard is in his mid-50s, with thinning gray hair and a sharp suit. He stood there, flashing his carefully practiced smile as he interacted with other customers. When Richard's eyes passed over John, that smile quickly disappeared, replaced by a cold, judgmental look. John pretended not to notice it. He picked up the watch from the display case, turned it over in his hands, assessing its weight. "Excuse me, can you tell me more about this watch?" John asked, his voice gentle and polite. Richard walked over with slow steps, his eyes examining John from head to toe. With normal clothes and a cap on his head, John completely did not fit the image that Richard expected of a customer of this store. Richard gave a faint, almost fake smile and replied, "It's one of our limited edition models. It's very unique, but I think it might not be what you're looking for." John kept a smile on his face. "Oh, why?" he asked, deliberately pushing the conversation further. Richard looked at John again, his eyes narrowed slightly, as if assessing, then said, "This is a high-end, very expensive item. Perhaps you would be interested in something more accessible then." A feeling of discomfort flashed through John's heart. He knew that Richard didn't recognize him, but the judgment and prejudice behind those words was clear. John decided to continue the challenge. "I like high-end items," he replied calmly. "What makes this watch so special?" Richard sighed, seemingly forced to explain further. "It is made by one of the finest watchmakers in Switzerland. The materials are top-notch, and the craftsmanship is unparalleled. This is a true collector's item, very rare, and has $122,000, Richard said, sounding a little reluctant, then continued, "But like I said, we have other options that might better fit your budget." John's smile remained the same, but inside, he felt disappointment rising. He gently placed the watch back in the display case, looking straight at Richard. "And what if I want to buy this watch?" John asked, his voice still calm, but slightly challenging. Richard's eyes flashed in annoyance. He replied, "I need to see proof of payment first. We don't let anyone walk out of here with our most valuable items without have financial security." John remained calm, but his patience was running thin. "So, is it the store's policy to ask questions about a customer's ability to pay before making a sale?" he asked, his eyes never leaving Richard. Richard's tone became defensive. "This isn't about asking questions. It's about ensuring the integrity of our brand and maintaining our image. We can't let just anyone come." in here and handling our valuables without ensuring they were competent. John stared at Richard for a few seconds, then turned away, nodding slightly. I understand, he said softly, then slowly walked towards the door. As he stepped out into the cool city air, he felt Richard's eyes following him, like a silent and harsh judgment. John stood on the side of the road, his eyes scanning the crowded crowd, his mind replaying what had just happened. He came here only with the intention of observing, to see how his store operates without his presence. But what he just witnessed only brought anger and disappointment. John knew this visit would not end here. He had seen enough to understand that action was needed. John stood outside the store for a moment longer, gathering his thoughts. He turned around and walked through the glass door again with clear determination. You'll find out whether this attitude is just an isolated incident or a systemic problem for the store you're most proud of. The bell rang gently as John entered the store a second time. This time he didn't look around, but went straight to where Richard Coleman was standing. Richard was still, near the counter, his eyes glued to the phone screen. When he saw John approaching, his eyes narrowed, the condescension still unchanged. John took a deep breath, reminded himself of his purpose, and then approached the display of designer coats. He gently touched the dark jacket, smooth fabric, elegant cut, perfect for fall. Sorry, John said, his voice calm and polite. Can you tell me more about this jacket? Richard looked up from the phone, his eyes moving from the jacket to John's face. He hesitated for a moment, then put the phone in his pocket and approached. A fake smile appeared on his lips. This is one of our high-end items, Richard replied, his tone still gentle but clearly lacking in sincerity. Italian wool, handmade, from the latest collection, very exclusive. John nodded, assessed the jacket, then asked, It's nice. How much does it cost? Richard's smile stiffened. It costs $2,500, he said, emphasizing each word as if explaining to a child. These items are for our high-end customers. We usually don't let anyone touch them without being sure they can afford it. John raised an eyebrow, keeping his tone neutral. I see. So you guys keep some items out of the reach of regular customers, right? Richard's face stiffened, still maintaining an outward politeness. Our regular customers know what they can buy and what they can't, he said laconically. We serve a specific group of customers, those who appreciate quality and can afford to buy. John slowly hung the jacket back on the hook, trying to contain his disappointment. I appreciate the quality, he said evenly, and I think I might be interested in this jacket. Richard's eyes flashed uneasily. He moved closer, his voice lowered as if to keep the conversation private. Look, Richard said, his tone a bit condescending. I don't mean to offend, but perhaps you should consider some more reasonable options. There's no point wasting time on the item is beyond my ability. John's patience was gradually wearing thin. He looked Richard straight in the eye, his voice firm but controlled. You don't know what I'm capable of, John replied, and assuming you know that based on my appearance is not good business. Richard's face became even more tense. He looked John up and down, clearly evaluating him again. We have an image to maintain, Richard said slowly, as if talking to someone who didn't understand the rules of the game. We can't let just anyone come in and handle our most valuable items. It's about preserving the brand. John looked straight into Richard's eyes, anger starting to show. Brand protection? John repeated. By judging people based on their appearance? That's no way to build loyalty or respect. Richard crossed his arms, taking a defensive stance. Our customers value exclusivity. They don't want to see just anyone being able to come in here and touch something they think is special. It's about the experience. It's about the environment. That's what makes us different. John took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving Richard. So you think treating potential customers with disrespect is part of that experience? He asked, his voice already cold. Richard shrugged, a smug look on his face. Look, I think I know my customers better than you, he said. My job is to protect the integrity of this store. John did not respond immediately. He looked around the store, his eyes scanning the carefully displayed luxury items. The other customers had begun to notice the tension between the two of them. Then John turned back to look at Richard. Thank you for your time, he said coldly. I think I've seen all I need. Without waiting to hear from Richard, John turned on his heel, and walked towards the door. The doorbell rang as he stepped outside, immersing himself in the cool air of the city. This time, John did not linger on the sidewalk, but walked quickly down the street. What he just experienced is unacceptable, not only as a businessman, but also as someone who believes in treating others with respect. He had realized the reality of his store, and now his anger had turned into determination. John knew that changes had to be made. Today, he was treated like a normal customer, judged by his appearance, dismissed without hesitation. But tomorrow, he'll be back, not as a John Lewis customer, but as a John Lewis owner. And everything will change. That night, John spent time thinking back on every word Richard said, every look of contempt. His frustration gradually turned into a clear plan. The next day, John did not return to the store with his smart clothes or the authoritative demeanor of an owner. He was wearing a simple black jacket, jeans and sneakers, exactly like yesterday's outfit. This time, he went back to see if that discriminatory attitude was a systemic problem or just a specific individual. As John entered the store, the bell rang softly. The space today seems quieter than yesterday, with fewer customers. John walked straight to the jewelry display area, his eyes landing on a glass display of diamond bracelets and necklaces, each item sparkling in the soft light, price tags discreetly hidden. While John was studying a bracelet with an intricate design, he caught sight of Richard standing near the back of the store, talking to a young woman. That woman was Sarah Moore, assistant manager. She was standing there looking nervous, fidgeting with her clipboard. Richard's deep voice rang out, full of determination, but without any respect. I don't care if he is a potential customer or not. We have the standards to always keep an eye on him. Sarah glanced toward John, her expression filled with worry and sympathy. Her and John's eyes met for a brief moment before she quickly looked away. John pretended not to notice, continuing to study the jewelry. But now he knew clearly that Richard was instructing his employees to monitor and evaluate him, just because of his appearance. John decides to confront Richard again, but this time, he wants to see how far Richard's bias has spread. He selected a diamond necklace and signaled a salesperson to assist. A young woman approached him, her face polite but reserved. "Good morning," John said with a warm smile. "Can you tell me more about this necklace?" The clerk glanced over her shoulder at Richard, who was now watching them intently. She hesitated, then turned back to John. "This is one of our signature dishes," she said softly. "It is crafted from the finest diamonds and set in platinum, priced at $15,000. John nodded, looking appreciative. "It's very beautiful," he said. "Can I take a closer look?" Before the clerk could answer, Richard stepped forward, his expression stern. "Is there a problem here?" Richard asked, aiming the question directly at the employee and not John. "No problem," John replied calmly, entering. "I just wanted to ask about this necklace. I want to see it more closely." Richard looked at John with annoyed eyes. "I don't think that's necessary," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "As I mentioned before, we have other items that may be more suitable for you." John kept his eyes on Richard, refusing to let go. "I'm interested in this item," he said firmly. "I want to see what it looks like." Richard crossed his arms over his chest, clearly losing patience. "Our policy is to keep items like this for serious customers who have serious buying intentions. I can't let just anyone try on our most valuable items." John looked at Richard with sharp eyes, his composure giving way to disappointment. He lowered his voice and said firmly, "And what makes you think I'm not serious? On what basis do you judge me?" Richard looked John up and down, a mocking expression on his face. "I have enough experience to know who can afford it and who can't," Richard said in a cold voice. "My job is to protect the integrity of this store and its brand. We have a reputation to uphold." John felt a wave of anger rise, but he tried to control it. He kept his voice steady and asked, "You maintain that reputation by judging people based on their appearance? By refusing to serve someone because you think they don't belong?" Richard kept his stiff expression. "It's not a personal issue. It's about preserving the brand. Our customers expect a certain level of exclusivity. I can't waste time on people who don't seriously want it." "Purchase." John stepped closer, lowering his voice a bit. So how many potential customers have you turned away because of your judgment? How many people have you disrespected because they didn't fit your idea of what a worthy customer? Richard clenched his jaw, his expression turning harsh. I run this store the way I see fit. I don't have to explain it to you. John stared at Richard, anger boiling beneath his calm exterior. You may not have to explain it to me, John said quietly but authoritatively, but you will have to answer to someone about this treatment. Not only is this bad for business, it's wrong. Richard looked confused for a moment, but quickly stiffened. If you don't like the way things are done here, you're free to leave, he said nonchalantly. There are many other stores that suit your tastes. John took a deep breath, stepped back, and glanced at Sarah, who was watching the conversation with concern. Thanks for your time, John, said to Richard, his voice cold. I'll be sure to let the right people know about how you run your store. John turned and walked out of the store, the doorbell ringing, seemingly louder than before as he stepped into the cool air of the city. He knows what he needs to do next. What you see today is not an isolated incident, but a whole system of discrimination and disrespect. He is determined to change. That night, John stayed up late, thinking about what steps to take next. He decided that the next day he would not return to that store, but go straight to his company's headquarters, where he would make decisions on the necessary changes. The next morning, John arrived at the company's headquarters, a shiny glass building in Midtown Manhattan. He entered the executive conference room, a vast space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. John sat at the head of the table, his expression calm but determined. He arranged for Richard Coleman to meet him here, under the pretense of discussing the store's performance and future goals. John knew that this invitation would ensure Richard's appearance. When Richard entered the room, his confident expression quickly turned to confusion when he saw John sitting at the head of the table. Richard looked at John with a questioning look, trying to sort out the situation in his mind. John remained silent, waiting for Richard to understand the situation. After a moment, John said, his voice calm and authoritative, "Sit down, Richard." Richard hesitated a bit, then pulled out a chair and sat across from John. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett," Richard said carefully. "I didn't expect to see you here. Is something wrong?" John leaned forward, his eyes steady. "No, Richard, things are not okay. I want to discuss some serious concerns about the way you are running the store." Richard's eyes flashed with confusion. Then he tried to regain his confidence. "Concerns? But I've run the store the way I think is best. Sales are always up and the brand image is strong. If there's a problem, I'm ready to fix it." John kept his eyes serious, his voice still calm but sharp. "Sales aren't the problem here, Richard. The problem is how you treat people." John paused, letting Richard digest his words, then continued. "Yesterday, I visited your store. I came as a normal customer, wearing casual clothes and no reveal his identity." Realizing this, Richard's face quickly turned pale, his eyes clearly showing panic. He opened his mouth to say something, but John continued before he could speak. "I've seen firsthand how you judge me based on my appearance," John said, his voice never wavering. "You make assumptions, despise me, and refuse to provide the level of service you would give to what you consider a deserving customer. And this isn't just about how you treat me, but also about how you might treat others, those who don't fit your narrow view of who deserves respect." Richard gulped, his voice awkward. "Mr. Bennett, I didn't know it was you." "If I knew—" John interrupted, his voice sharp and clear. "Exactly. The point is you don't have to know who someone is to treat them with basic courtesy. This company stands for harmony. We build our brand on the idea that luxury isn't just about exclusivity. It's about making people feel valued, the exact opposite of what I wanted." Richard sat quietly in his chair, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm just trying to maintain the brand's image," he said, his voice weak. "Our customers expect an atmosphere of exclusivity." John frowned, his voice became harder. "Our customers expect quality products and respectful service, no matter what they look like or how they dress. They deserve to be welcomed without judgment. Your behavior undermines everything this brand stands for." Richard leaned back, his face gradually turning desperate. "Mr. Bennett, please. I can change. I understand now. I will do better. I will take training, do whatever you ask." John shook his head slowly. It's too late for that, Richard. Your attitude is not something that can be changed with training. This is a fundamental problem with how you view people, and that's not what that I may allow to continue in my store. Effective immediately, I will terminate your franchise agreement. Richard's eyes widened in shock. You can't be serious? I've worked at this company for many years. I helped build the store's reputation. You can't just cut ties with me like this. John stood up, his eyes never leaving Richard. I can and I will. Your behavior reflects on the entire company, and I will not let one person's bias tarnish what we have built. Security will escort you. Out. You will. Receive instructions on the termination process and what happens next. Richard stood up with a look of disbelief and anger on his face. You're making a big mistake, Mr. Bennett. I'm the best manager this company has ever had. You'll regret this. John remained calm, his voice even. The biggest mistake would be to put yourself in a position to damage the value of this company. I will not regret making sure my store is run by people who understand what this brand truly represents. What does it stand for? Richard looked at John for a moment, then suddenly turned and rushed out of the room, his footsteps echoing in the hallway. John watched him leave, feeling a little uneasy, but knowing that the decision had been made for the right reasons. Not just to fire Richard, but to protect the integrity of his company and ensuring that every customer is respected and appreciated. John turned to Lisa, his assistant, who had been silently watching the entire conversation. Make sure Richard is escorted out and the transition begins immediately, John said. Lisa nodded. Yes, Mr. Bennett, I'll handle it. John walked to the large window looking out over the city. Today he took a necessary step. There will be more work to do, more changes to ensure that every store under his brand maintains the values he believes in. But for now, John feels calm and believes the message has been sent clearly. Respect and integrity will always come first. The next day, John wasted no time making changes at the store. He scheduled a meeting with employees at headquarters to discuss the new direction and reassure them that, despite the sudden change in management, their jobs were secure and they were always valued. Company. The meeting was held in a private meeting room at the company headquarters. A smaller room, but still elegant and luxurious. The staff showed both curious and worried expressions as they gathered in front of John, while Sarah stood next to him with a more confident and calm look than before. John stood up and began to speak. Thank you all for coming, he began, his voice calm and reassuring. I know the past few days have been very challenging, and I want to be clear with you about what is going on. Richard Coleman is no longer with the company. This decision is necessary to reorient operations of the store in accordance with the values we represent. A soft whisper rang out in the room. John could see the worry and wonder in the employees' eyes. They didn't know how this would affect their future. First, John continued, keeping eye contact with as many people as possible. I want to make it clear that your positions are not affected. We appreciate each of you and your work. You have been doing it. However, we will need to make some changes to ensure that our stores provide a welcoming environment for all customers, no matter who they are or what they look like. It's not just about selling. It's about building relationships and treating everyone who walks through the store with respect. John motioned for Sarah to step up. Sarah will take on the role of interim manager, he continued. She will lead our team in this process, and we will grow together to improve the way we interact with customers. This is not a finger-pointing process, but a collaborative process, developed together. Sarah stepped forward, her voice even and steady. As the new interim manager, I will work closely with each of you to ensure that we all understand the company's expectations. We will provide training sessions created about customer service, focusing on welcoming everyone with respect. We want to create an environment where every customer feels welcome. One of the sales associates, James, raised his hand and asked, "What will this training include, and how long will it last?" he asked. Sarah nodded and replied, "The training will cover everything from how to greet customers to handling sensitive situations. We will have workshops on cultural awareness and harmony. The goal is to ensure that everyone feels confident in providing the best service possible. We will start with a series of short sessions over the next few weeks, and will continue with ongoing training throughout the year." Another employee, Lisa, asked, What if we see behavior that doesn't align with these values? Who can we report directly to? John interjected, his voice filled with seriousness. You can report any concerns to Sarah, and you can also come see me in person. My door is always open. We look into these matters seriously and want everyone to feel safe and supported when speaking up. We're building a culture of accountability and respect, and that starts with all of us. The staff nodded, and John could sense a change in the room. The tension has eased, replaced by a cautious optimism. More than just hearing about changes, they get to participate and contribute to the process, which is important in building trust. John continued asking, "Are there any other questions?" Another employee, Claire, spoke up. "How should we handle a situation where a customer is upset or discriminatory? What should we do?" Sarah replied, "That's a good question, Claire. Part of the training will include conflict resolution and de-escalation techniques. If you feel uncomfortable or if the customer behaves inappropriately, call your manager immediately. We want you to feel supported and reassured as you handle the situation professionally." John nodded in agreement. "Remember, you're not alone in this. We're a team, and we'll work together to make sure that everyone feels respected, from staff to the customers." The employees' stress gradually dissipated. They felt more secure with the clear plan and support provided. John himself felt relieved. He knows these changes won't solve every problem right away, but they're a start to making the store a place where everyone feels welcome and valued. "Thank you all for taking the time to listen," John said, concluding the meeting. "I believe in each and every one of you, and I believe we can make this store a representation of our brand. Let's work together to make it happen." After the meeting, the staff began to disperse, some staying to confer further with Sarah, others returning to their daily routines, but clearly with a renewed sense of purpose. John stood back and observed, looking at the way the staff interacted with each other with a feeling of relief. He made the right decision to promote Sarah. She demonstrates leadership qualities and connections with employees that Richard completely lacks. As the room gradually emptied, John turned to Sarah. "You did great today," he said, his voice sincere. "The staff respects you and is looking to you for guidance. Keep this up." Sarah smiled, looking both relieved and determined. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett. I will not disappoint you. I believe we can create a positive environment here." John nodded. "I believe in you. I'll check in regularly, but I have confidence in your ability to manage things. If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out." Sarah nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "Yes, Mr. Bennett, I will do my best to build this store into a place where everyone wants to come." John left the conference room, his mind already on the next steps. There will be many more stores for him to visit and many managers to meet. The issue with Richard is a wake-up call, a reminder that even the most prestigious brands can be affected by bias and poor leadership. As John walked through the hallways of headquarters, he felt a new sense of purpose. Confronting Richard was not easy, but it was necessary. Justice is not just about punishing wrongdoing, but also about creating an environment where such behavior is not tolerated. John is committed to building a company where respect, inclusion, and integrity are not just words in a mission statement, but principles that guide every decision, every action, and every interaction. John returned to the office, determined to ensure that the changes at the store were not just temporary, but became part of the company culture. He decided to take another step to strengthen the values he wanted to build. You need to make sure your stores represent not only luxury, but also respect and inclusion. A week later, John decided to make an unannounced visit to the store. He wanted to see how the change was progressing, not only from the manager's perspective, but also from how employees treated customers. As John entered the store, the familiar doorbell rang, and he was immediately greeted by James, the young sales associate he remembered from the meeting. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett," James said with a warm smile. "Nice to meet you." "Good morning, James," John replied, shaking his hand. "How's it going?" James nodded enthusiastically. "Everything went really well, Mr. Bennett. The training sessions were very helpful, and Sarah did a great job. The whole team felt more connected, and we all had a clear understanding of how we want to treat customers." John smiled with satisfaction. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Keep up the good work." I'm so proud of how you all have handled this transition. As John moved deeper into the store, he noticed that customers were greeted warmly, staff were helpful without hesitation, and the overall atmosphere was very positive. This was completely different from the tense atmosphere he had felt during his first visit when Richard was in charge. John feels pleased to see his vision gradually becoming a reality. He continued to the back of the store, where Sarah was talking to a customer. When she saw John, Sarah smiled and asked the customer for a moment, walking over to greet him. "Mr. Bennett, nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you, Sarah," John said, his voice filled with respect. "I just wanted to stop by and see how things are going. Looks like you're doing great." Sarah's face lit up with pride. "Thanks, Mr. Bennett. The team is really great. They have embraced the changes, and we are getting very positive feedback from customers. I think we are on the right track." John nodded in agreement. "I think so too. You've turned things around very quickly, and I couldn't be more pleased with the progress I'm seeing. I'll continue to support you in any way I can." The two were talking when the doorbell rang again, and John turned to look. He suddenly saw Richard Coleman standing at the entrance. Richard's suit looked less elegant than usual, his face full of worry and fatigue. Richard's eyes scanned the store, stopping. When he saw John and Sarah, John's expression stiffened slightly. He didn't expect to see Richard here, especially after their last meeting. Richard approached. His steps were slower than usual. His posture was no longer as confident as before. "Mr. Bennett," Richard began, his voice pleading, "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see, but I need to talk to you. Please give me a moment." John's face remained calm. He glanced at Sarah, who seemed surprised but remained silent. Then back to Richard. "Okay, Richard," John said coldly, "I have a moment. What do you want to say?" Richard took a deep breath, his shoulders slumping. "I came to apologize, Mr. Bennett," Richard said, his voice shaking. "I know I was wrong. I've had time to think about my behavior, and now I realize that I made a terrible mistake. I judge people unfairly. I'm sorry for all I've done." John listened without interrupting, his eyes betraying no emotion. Richard continued, his voice filled with desperation. "I've worked at this company for many years. I care very much about this brand. Please give me another chance to prove that I can exchange that I can, run the store the way you want." John was silent for a moment, letting Richard's words hang in the air. He thought about the countless times Richard might have dismissed customers simply because of their appearance, the same way he had treated John himself. Richard's sudden change in attitude seems to come more from despair than from genuine remorse. "I appreciate your apology, Richard," John finally said, his voice calm but firm. "But this wasn't just a small mistake. This was a pattern of behavior and thinking that he had demonstrated over many years. What I saw at the store was not a temporary incident, but an attitude deeply inconsistent with our values." Richard's face drooped, his eyes filled with disappointment and despair. "Mr. Bennett, please," he begged. "I can learn. I can change. Just give me back the store, and I'll prove it." John shook his head, his voice still calm, but determined. "The decision has been made, Richard. The store is doing very well under Sarah's leadership, and staff have responded positively to the changes. I can't go back to my old ways. I'm responsible. Responsibility to this company and to every customer who walks through those doors. Allowing you back would undermine what we have worked to build." Richard bowed his head, his shoulders slumping as if all hope was finally gone. He looked at John with a bored look, his voice became weak. "I understand. I just thought maybe—" John's voice softened a bit. "Richard, I hope you see this as an opportunity for reflection and growth. This is not about punishment, but about ensuring the right people uphold the values of the brand. I wish you luck in your future endeavors, but this store no longer belongs to you." Richard nodded heavily and said quietly, "Thank you for your time, Mr. Bennett." Without another word, he turned and walked out of the store, his steps heavy and sad. John watched Richard's footsteps, feeling a little sympathy, but still determined. Richard's apology came too late, because the damage had already been done, and John couldn't risk the integrity of the brand to give Richard another chance. "Your responsibility is to your company, your employees, and your customers." Sarah stood quietly next to John, a look of obvious relief on her face. "Thanks for not letting him back," she said softly. "I think the staff would feel worried if he did that. John nodded. I make decisions based on what's best for the store and the people who work here. You've done a great job, Sarah. Keep up the good work. We're building something special, and I have confidence in your leadership abilities. Sarah smiled, a sense of accomplishment shining in her eyes. Thank you, Mr. Bennett. I will not disappoint you. I will ensure that the store represents the best of what your brand stands for. John looked around the store, observing the employees interacting with customers. Every conversation is positive, enthusiastic, and welcoming. The change is real, and John clearly feels its positive impact. He felt proud and satisfied. While there may be many challenges ahead, with strong leadership and a commitment to the company's values, he knows they can be met. As John left the store, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This is exactly what he has worked hard to create. A brand that not only represents luxury, but also respect, integrity, and inclusion. With the right people like Sarah at the helm, he believes this vision will continue to grow and spread. The next day, John held a meeting of the entire store staff to share the changes he and Sarah had made. He wants everyone to understand that the company will always be committed to treating everyone fairly and respectfully, from employees to customers. Everyone felt the sincerity in John's words and saw his determination to create a positive work environment. John knows that rebuilding trust and creating a new company culture doesn't happen overnight. But he is willing to invest the time and effort necessary to ensure that his stores become places where anyone feels welcome and appreciated. As time passed, changes at the store began to be noticed by customers. Compliments about the better service, warm welcome, and positive atmosphere began to appear. This not only brings customer satisfaction, but also makes employees feel proud of the work they are doing. One afternoon, Sarah walked into John's office with a bright smile. Mr. Bennett, I wanted to let you know that we just received a letter from a longtime customer. They said our store has never been better, and they were very impressed with the way we treated them, dealing with customers. John smiled, his heart filled with joy. That's exactly what he wanted. A place where everyone felt respected, regardless of status, appearance, or any other factor. He knows that these values not only help the store grow, but also help create real connections with customers. Sarah, I'm so proud of you and the whole team, John said. We're not just selling products, we're creating real relationships with our customers. That's what creates lasting value. Sarah nodded, her eyes filled with determination. We will continue to uphold these values and make the store a place where everyone wants to come. John looked through the window, the sunset slowly falling on the New York skyline. He felt a sense of satisfaction and peace of mind. His job is not just about business, but about leadership, using his position to create positive change. With people like Sarah at the helm, John believes his stores will continue to grow as not just places that offer luxury products, but places where everyone feels welcome. In respect, John knows that the road ahead will have challenges, but today he took an important step to ensure that his brand is not just about luxury, but also about respect and inclusion. It was a vision he would never give up.